The USS Bloodhound drifted silently through the dark void of space, its sensors scanning for any unusual activity along the Outer Rim territories. Commander Jake Miller sat in his captain's chair, reviewing routine patrol reports when his communications officer suddenly straightened up. "Sir, we're picking up something strange," Petty Officer Rodriguez called out, adjusting his headset. "It's not coming through normal channels." Jake walked over to the communications station, his boots echoing in the quiet bridge. What he saw on the screen made him pause. The signal was unlike anything in their database, organic, almost musical, but carrying an undertone of pure terror. "Can you clean it up?" Jake asked. Rodriguez worked his console expertly. "Running it through the universal translator now, sir. This might take a few minutes." As the translation program processed the alien language, Jake noticed something disturbing. The signal wasn't just a message, it was a desperate plea being broadcast across multiple star systems simultaneously. Whoever sent this was using enormous amounts of energy, the kind you'd only spend if your entire civilization was at stake. The first clear words came through the speakers, and they sent chills down Jake's spine. A gentle, frightened voice spoke in broken standard English, "Please, any Death World species, we need help. The Harkon swarm comes. They eat everything. 40 of our worlds are gone." Jake's crew exchanged worried glances. The term, Death World species, was galactic code for civilizations that evolved on planets so hostile that survival required extreme aggression. Most peaceful alien races avoided contact with Deathworlders entirely, considering them too dangerous and unpredictable. "Sir," Rodriguez continued, "there's more. They're identifying themselves as the Villani Republic. According to our star charts, they control about 60 star systems in the Beta sector." "Controlled," Jake corrected grimly. "If they've lost 40 worlds in 3 months, they're down to 20 systems." The message continued playing, and Jake learned more about the Villani's desperate situation. They were herbivorous beings who had never developed weapons of war. Their technology focused on agriculture, medicine, and peaceful exploration. They had no military, no weapons, no concept of organized violence. But now something called the Harkon swarm was systematically destroying their civilization. The Villani described the attackers as a hive-minded species that consumed all organic matter on every planet they conquered. They adapted quickly to any defense the Villani tried, making resistance seemingly impossible. Jake immediately contacted Admiral Tom Bradley at Earth Defense Command. The Admiral's face appeared on the main screen within minutes, his expression serious as Jake played the alien distress call. "Interesting timing," Admiral Bradley said after listening to the message. "Our deep space scouts have been reporting strange activity in that sector. Entire star systems going dark, no explanation." "Sir, the Villani are offering advanced technology in exchange for military protection," Jake reported. "Their message mentions force field generators, faster-than-light communications, and medical tech that can regrow lost limbs." Admiral Bradley leaned back in his chair, considering the implications. Most alien species in the galaxy viewed humans as dangerous savages, barely one step above wild animals. They feared Earth's military capabilities and avoided contact whenever possible. But now, for the first time, an advanced alien civilization was actively seeking human help. "The interesting part," the Admiral continued, "is that they specifically asked for Death World species. They know exactly what they're requesting." Jake nodded. "They're desperate enough to contact the species everyone else fears." Within hours, Earth Defense Command made their decision. This was an opportunity to establish humanity as a major player in galactic politics while potentially gaining access to alien technology that could advance Earth's development by centuries. Captain Lisa Hayes received her orders that same day. Her stealth cruiser Reaper was perfectly suited for reconnaissance missions in hostile territory. The ship could slip past most alien detection systems unnoticed, gathering intelligence before committing larger forces to battle. As Captain Hayes prepared for departure, she studied everything known about the Harkon swarm. The limited information available painted them as a nightmare species, billions of individual organisms operating with a single collective mind, consuming entire planets before moving to the next target. What the peaceful Villani didn't realize was that their desperate plea for help had just reached the most efficient predators in the galaxy. Humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare, and they were about to introduce the concept of total war to a universe that had never seen anything like it. The Reaper launched quietly into the darkness, carrying humanity's response to the Villani's plea. The galaxy's balance of power was about to shift permanently, and the peaceful herbivores who had called for help were about to learn why every other species feared the Deathworlders from Earth. The USS Reaper emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Villani territory, its stealth systems active and sensors scanning for hostile activity. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge, studying the tactical display that showed the locations of remaining Villani colonies. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Captain," her tactical officer called out, "I'm detecting massive energy readings from the Kilos station. It's one of their major civilian hubs." Hayes adjusted the main viewer to focus on the station. What appeared on screen would haunt her crew for years to come. The Kilos station, home to over 3 million Villani civilians, was being systematically devoured by something that defied description. The Harkon swarm moved like a living wave of destruction. Individual creatures, each the size of a small fighter craft, swarmed over the station's hull. They weren't using weapons in any traditional sense. Instead, they were literally eating through the metal, consuming everything in their path. The station's defensive systems fired desperately, but the energy beams seemed to have less effect with each passing minute. "They're adapting in real time," Hayes whispered, watching the horror unfold. "Look at how they're responding to the station's weapons." Her science officer, Lieutenant Danny Park, monitored the readings with growing alarm. "Captain, the Harkon creatures are somehow changing their cellular structure to resist the Villani energy weapons. Each blast that hits them makes the next one less effective." Within 10 minutes, the massive station was gone. 3 million lives snuffed out as if they had never existed. The Harkon swarm moved on without pause, leaving behind only empty space and debris. Hayes immediately ordered her communications officer to attempt contact with any surviving Villani forces in the system. After several tense minutes, a weak signal came through from a damaged escort ship that had managed to escape the carnage. When the Villani commander appeared on screen, Hayes understood why most species feared humans at first sight. The alien was clearly terrified, not just of the Harkon swarm, but of the human face staring back at him. The Villani looked like an oversized rabbit crossed with a deer. His large, dark eyes were positioned on the sides of his head, giving him a wide field of vision perfect for spotting predators. His small mouth was designed for eating vegetation, and his entire body language screamed, "Prey species." You are human?" the Villani commander stammered, his translator struggling with his nervous speech patterns. "You came from the death world called Earth?" "I'm Captain Hayes of Earth Defense Command," she replied, keeping her voice calm and steady. "We received your distress signal." The alien commander seemed to shrink back from the screen. Hayes realized that everything about human appearance probably triggered deep evolutionary fears in herbivorous species. Her forward-facing eyes marked her as a hunter. Her visible canine teeth suggested she was designed to tear flesh. Even her upright posture and broad shoulders indicated a creature built for combat. Ambassador Rick Stone, who had been specially trained for first-contact situations, stepped into view. His job was to help ease the fear that humans naturally inspired in peaceful species. "Commander," Stone said gently, "we understand you're fighting an enemy that adapts to your weapons. Can you tell us more about their tactics?" The Villani commander, whose name translated roughly to "gentle wind through leaves," began explaining their impossible situation. His people had tried everything: energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, even ramming attacks with unmanned ships. The Harkon swarm adapted to every strategy within hours. "They learned from each attack," Gentlewind explained, his voice shaking. "Our plasma cannons worked for maybe 20 minutes before they became useless. Our shields held them back for half a day before they found a way through. How do you fight an enemy that becomes immune to everything you try? Captain Hayes studied the tactical data the Villani commander transmitted to her ship. The information revealed something interesting. The Harkon swarm had never encountered anything like human warfare tactics. Your weapons are impressive, Hayes said after reviewing the data. But you fight like prey animals trying to scare off a predator. You use the same attacks repeatedly, hoping they'll work better if you make them stronger. The Villani commander looked confused. What other way is there to fight? Hayes smiled, and the expression made several Villani crew members visible on the screen step backward in fear. You've never fought persistence hunters before. We don't rely on single weapons or predictable patterns. We change tactics constantly, use multiple attack types simultaneously, and we never stop adapting. She paused, studying the alien's frightened expression. Tell me, have the Harkon ever faced an enemy that deliberately sacrifices resources to achieve victory? An enemy that considers acceptable losses part of strategy? Acceptable losses? Gentlewind repeated the words as if they made no sense. You mean deliberately allowing your people to die? If necessary, Hayes replied coldly. We call it warfare. The concept clearly horrified the peaceful Villani. Their entire civilization was built around preserving life and avoiding conflict. The idea of deliberately accepting casualties to achieve tactical advantage was completely foreign to them. Hayes immediately contacted Earth Defense Command, uploading all the intelligence she had gathered. Her message was brief but urgent. The Harkon swarm is everything the Villani described and worse. We need the full fleet for complete extermination. This isn't a rescue mission, it's pest control on a galactic scale. As she waited for Earth's response, Hayes continued studying the Harkon attack patterns. These creatures had never encountered a species that treated war as a science, that adapted faster than their enemies could evolve defenses. The Harkon swarm was about to learn what happened when persistence hunters decided something needed to die. 3 weeks after Captain Hayes sent her urgent message to Earth, the fabric of space itself seemed to scream as hyperspace rifts tore open across the Villani system. What emerged from those tears in reality made the peaceful herbivores gasp in a mixture of awe and terror. Admiral Mike Johnson's flagship, the massive dreadnought Ragnarok, led the human armada through the dimensional gateway. Behind it came wave after wave of Earth's most advanced warships, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, and support vessels. 200 ships in total, each one designed with a single purpose in mind, to destroy anything that threatened human interests. The Villani had expected sleek, graceful vessels like their own ships or those of other civilized species they had encountered. Instead, they saw angular, brutal-looking craft that resembled massive weapons more than transportation vessels. Every surface was covered in armor plating, weapon mounts, and sensor arrays. These ships weren't built for exploration or trade, they were built for war. By the Great Grove, whispered Commander Gentlewind from his damaged escort ship, they look like flying fortresses. Captain Hayes, watching from her stealth cruiser, felt a surge of pride as she observed the human fleet's arrival. Each ship represented decades of military engineering focused on one goal, winning battles at any cost. While alien civilizations built beautiful ships that could fight when necessary, humans built ugly ships that existed only to kill. The Villani communication channels buzzed with confused chatter as they tried to understand what they were seeing. Human warships carried weapons that most galactic civilizations had banned as too destructive or inhumane. Kinetic rail guns that fired solid projectiles at incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles capable of cracking planets. Electromagnetic pulse weapons that could disable entire fleets. Chemical warheads filled with corrosive agents. And most shocking of all, biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. Are those boarding pods? Asked a Villani engineer, pointing at the strange cylindrical objects mounted on the human ship's hulls. Ambassador Rick Stone, still aboard Hayes' ship, explained patiently, humans prefer close combat when possible. Those pods contain marine assault teams. The concept of boarding enemy vessels during space combat was so foreign to most galactic civilizations that they didn't even have proper translations for it. The Volani fought their battles at long range with energy weapons, considering hand-to-hand combat primitive and barbaric. Admiral Johnson's voice boomed across all communication channels as he addressed both his human fleet and the surviving Volani forces. All ships, this is Admiral Johnson. We're here to solve a pest problem. The Harkon swarm has been terrorizing civilized beings for too long. Today, we teach them what fear means. As if summoned by his words, Harkon scout ships began emerging from the outer asteroid belt. These creatures had been monitoring the system since their last feeding, waiting for the right moment to finish off the remaining Volani colonies. They approached the human fleet with confidence, having never encountered weapons that could seriously threaten them. The first Harkon scouts were sleek, organic vessels that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. They moved through space like living things, which they essentially were. Each ship was actually a massive creature bred specifically for space combat, its hull covered in adaptive tissue that could quickly develop resistance to any weapon used against it. Perfect timing, Captain Hayes muttered, watching the enemy approach. Let's show them how humans say hello. The demonstration began without warning. Hayes' ship, the Reaper, suddenly decloaked and launched a coordinated attack that would have been impossible for any other species to execute. Instead of using one type of weapon repeatedly until the enemy adapted, she fired everything simultaneously. Kinetic rounds from rail guns struck the lead Harkon ship while energy beams from plasma cannons hit different sections. Nuclear-tipped missiles detonated against its flanks while electromagnetic pulses scrambled its nervous system. Chemical sprayers released corrosive clouds while boarding pods launched toward the creature's most vulnerable points. The Harkon ship tried desperately to adapt to the barrage, its organic hull shifting and changing as it attempted to develop resistance to each attack type. But before it could fully adapt to the kinetic rounds, the plasma beams had already done their damage. Before it could resist the nuclear explosions, the chemical weapons had eaten through its armor. The creature's adaptive abilities, so effective against single weapon types, became useless against coordinated multispectrum attacks. You want to adapt? Hayes growled into her communicator, knowing the Harkon could intercept human transmissions. Adapt to this. The first boarding pod punched through the dying creature's hull. Colonel Dave Williams emerged with his Marine squad, carrying weapons that would have horrified any civilized species. Instead of advanced energy weapons, they used flamethrowers, explosive charges, and even old-fashioned axes for close combat. The Harkon creatures inside their ship had never faced enemies that fought with such brutal efficiency. These humans didn't just want to win, they wanted to completely dominate and terrorize their opponents. Williams' team moved through the organic corridors like a force of nature, destroying everything in their path with methodical precision. News of the engagement spread instantly through the Harkon collective consciousness. For the first time in their species' history, they felt genuine fear. These Deathworlders didn't fight to defend territory or capture resources. They fought to prove a point, that nothing in the galaxy was more dangerous than an angry human. The surviving Harkon scouts retreated in panic, carrying a message that would shake their entire swarm. The Deathworld species had arrived, and they brought weapons that adaptation couldn't counter. The galaxy's most efficient predators had just announced their presence, and they were ready for total war. The final confrontation began when the main Harkon fleet arrived at Volani Prime, the last major world of the herbivorous Republic. What emerged from hyperspace was a nightmare made real, thousands upon thousands of organic ships, each one a living creature bred for destruction. The biofleet stretched across space like a dark ocean, pulsing with alien life and hungry for another world to consume. Admiral Johnson watched the enemy approach from the bridge of the Ragnarok. His tactical display showed impossible odds, nearly 10,000 Harkon vessels against his fleet of 200 human ships. Any rational commander would have retreated immediately. But humans had never been particularly rational when it came to protecting those under their care. All ships, prepare for full engagement, Johnson announced calmly. Remember, we're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to teach these creatures why the galaxy fears Deathworlders. The first thing that shocked the Harkon Collective was the sound. As the human fleet moved into attack formation, every ship began broadcasting audio across all frequencies. But these weren't communication attempts or surrender offers. Instead, the void filled with the most aggressive music Earth had ever produced, thunderous drums, screaming guitars, and vocals that spoke of ancient battles and glorious death. Captain Beth Anderson, commanding the destroyer Fury, cranked up her ship's external speakers to maximum volume. The heavy metal music that poured from her vessel was so intense that it actually interfered with sensitive Harkon biological sensors. "Let's give these bugs a taste of human culture," she laughed into her communicator. But the music was only the beginning. Human ships began projecting holographic displays across the battlefield, images from Earth's most famous conflicts. The Harkon Collective watched in growing horror as they saw footage of human warriors charging into battle with primitive weapons, soldiers fighting to the death in impossible odds, and aerial combat where pilots deliberately crashed their aircraft into enemy targets. The psychological impact was immediate. The Harkon had never encountered a species that celebrated violence and death in battle. Their collective minds struggled to process the implications of what they were seeing. These creatures didn't just fight when necessary, they seemed to enjoy it. Colonel Dave Williams, preparing his Marines for boarding actions, took the psychological warfare even further. His troops painted their faces with traditional war paint patterns from various Earth cultures, Native American designs, Celtic spirals, and African tribal markings. Some soldiers even attached primitive weapons like tomahawks and knives to their modern combat suits. "Marines," Williams announced over the squad communications, "today we show these aliens what humans looked like before we got civilized. Make your ancestors proud." The actual combat began with Captain Anderson's signature tactic, coordinated kamikaze drone strikes. Unlike other species who considered suicide attacks wasteful and primitive, humans had perfected them into an art form. Hundreds of unmanned fighters loaded with nuclear warheads screamed toward the Harkon fleet while Anderson's maniacal laughter echoed across open channels. "Come on, you ugly space bugs," she shouted, directing her drones with deadly precision. "Let's dance." The Harkon tried to adapt their defenses against the drone swarms, but the humans had anticipated this. Each wave of drones used completely different attack patterns and explosive types. By the time the creatures developed resistance to nuclear warheads, the next wave was already hitting them with antimatter charges. When conventional weapons began losing effectiveness, the humans unveiled something that would become legendary in galactic military history. Research teams back on Earth had been working around the clock to modify common terrestrial bacteria into biological weapons specifically designed to target Harkon physiology. Lieutenant Mark Roberts, serving aboard the science vessel Darwin, supervised the release of these microscopic weapons. Deploying bacterial payload, he reported clinically. "Let's see how fast they can adapt to Earth germs." The results were devastating. The Harkon Collective had spent millennia perfecting their ability to rapidly adapt to technological weapons and energy-based attacks. But Earth bacteria operated on completely different principles. These microscopic organisms attacked cellular structures in ways the Harkon had never encountered, reproducing and mutating faster than the alien immune systems could respond. Entire sections of the Harkon biofleet began dying from the inside out as the modified bacteria spread through their organic hulls. The creatures' adaptive abilities, so effective against conventional weapons, proved useless against biological warfare designed by a species that had been fighting microscopic enemies for millions of years. The most shocking moment came when Roberts led a boarding party onto a crippled Harkon nursery ship. What he found inside would have horrified any other galactic civilization, chambers filled with Harkon young in various stages of development. Any civilized species would have protected these innocents or simply avoided such targets entirely. Roberts had no such limitations. "These aren't children," he reported coldly to his superiors. "These are future weapons being grown to kill peaceful civilizations. Eliminate all targets." His Marines moved through the nursery chambers with mechanical efficiency, ensuring that this particular Harkon ship would never produce another generation of World Eaters. The psychological impact on the collective consciousness was enormous. These humans would kill enemy young without hesitation or remorse. For the first time in their species' existence, stretching back over 10,000 years, the Harkon swarm experienced genuine terror. They had encountered predators before, but never anything like this. These humans fought with a combination of advanced technology, primitive savagery, and cold calculation that defied everything the collective mind understood about warfare. The retreat began within hours. The Harkon biofleet, reduced to less than half its original strength, fled the Villani system in complete disorder. They carried with them a new understanding: there were worse things in the galaxy than hungry swarms, and they had just met the apex predators of the known universe. The aftermath of the battle at Villani Prime sent shockwaves across the entire galaxy. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Harkon swarm had retreated from a battlefield. Not a tactical withdrawal or strategic repositioning, but a full-scale flight driven by pure terror. The collective consciousness that had consumed hundreds of worlds over millennia had encountered something that shattered their confidence completely. News of the human victory spread through hyperspace communication networks faster than any military fleet could travel. Within days, every major civilization knew that the Deathworlders from Earth had accomplished what no other species had ever managed: they had made the Harkon afraid. On Villani Prime, the surviving population gathered in massive celebrations that lasted for weeks. The herbivorous beings danced in their crystal cities, sang ancient songs of gratitude, and praised the warriors who had saved them from extinction. But beneath the joy, a darker emotion lingered. The same humans who had rescued them from certain death were also the most terrifying creatures most Villani had ever encountered. Commander Gentlewind, now promoted to Admiral of the reformed Villani Defense Fleet, struggled with this complex reality during his first meeting with Admiral Johnson aboard the Ragnarok. The human warship's corridors intimidated him. Everything was designed for efficiency rather than comfort, with weapons storage areas visible through reinforced windows and combat readiness alerts constantly echoing through the halls. "Your people saved us," Gentlewind said carefully, "but I must ask, what do you expect in return?" Admiral Johnson smiled, an expression that made the Villani officer instinctively step backward. "We expect cooperation, Admiral. Earth is now the primary military power in this sector. Any species under our protection follows our rules." The terms were simple but absolute. Protected civilizations would accept human military advisors who would train their forces in proper combat doctrine. They would provide intelligence about potential threats and allow human bases to be established in their territory. Most importantly, they would never question human methods during military operations. "Some of your tactics." Gentlewind began hesitantly, then stopped. He had seen the recordings of human Marines eliminating Harkon nurslings, watched Captain Anderson laugh while coordinating suicide attacks, witnessed the deployment of biological weapons that caused enemy ships to rot from within. "Our tactics win wars," Johnson replied coldly. "Your people were 3 months away from complete extinction when you called us. Now you're safe. Don't question the methods that saved your civilization." Throughout the galaxy, other species watched these developments with growing concern. The peaceful trading federations, the scholarly research coalitions, and the diplomatic confederations all faced the same uncomfortable truth: the humans had demonstrated that military might ultimately determine survival, and no one else came close to matching Earth's capacity for organized violence. Captain Lisa Hayes, now commanding a new stealth cruiser called the Phantom, received orders to carry humanity's message to every corner of known space. Her ship jumped from system to system, broadcasting the same transmission to each civilization she encountered. The message was brief but carried enormous implications: "This is Captain Hayes of Earth Defense Command. Humanity has arrived in galactic affairs. We offer protection to peaceful civilizations and total destruction to aggressive ones. We defend the innocent and exterminate threats without mercy or hesitation. Every species must now choose their position carefully." The response varied dramatically across different civilizations. The herbivorous races and peaceful traders immediately began sending diplomatic missions to Earth, eager to secure protection agreements before any other threats emerged. They had seen what happened to species that opposed human interests, and they had no desire to experience it themselves. More concerning were the reactions from traditionally aggressive civilizations. Several military powers that had previously dominated their local sectors suddenly found themselves reconsidering expansion plans. The warlike Thek Empire, which had been preparing to invade a neighboring system, quietly cancelled their operations after reviewing footage of the Harkon defeat. But not everyone was intimidated. Deep in the galactic core, ancient civilizations that had ruled for millions of years began mobilizing their own forces. They viewed humanity's rapid rise as a direct challenge to the established order and started forming alliances to contain the new threat. Colonel Dave Williams, now promoted to general and placed in charge of human ground forces, established training facilities on dozens of worlds. His Marines began teaching other species the basics of human combat doctrine, though most alien soldiers struggled with concepts like acceptable casualties and total war. Fighting to win isn't enough, Williams explained to a group of Villani recruits during a training exercise. You have to fight to dominate completely. Your enemy needs to know that opposing you means facing consequences worse than surrender. The galaxy's economic systems began shifting as well. Human technology, particularly weapons and defensive systems, became the most sought-after commodities in interstellar trade. Species that had previously focused on art, philosophy, or pure science suddenly found themselves desperate to acquire military knowledge. Captain Beth Anderson, commanding a new heavy cruiser, led patrol fleets that enforced humanity's growing sphere of influence. Her ships appeared wherever aggressive species threatened peaceful ones, delivering swift and brutal justice. The sight of human warships entering a system became enough to end most conflicts before they could begin. Within 6 months, the political map of the galaxy had been completely redrawn. Humanity controlled or influenced nearly a quarter of known space, not through conquest but through the simple fact that everyone knew they could destroy anyone who opposed them. The Deathworlders had become more than just another species, they were the new apex predators determining who lived and who died. The age of peaceful coexistence was over. The humans had arrived, and their message was clear: behave according to their standards, or face the consequences. The galaxy now operated under human rules, whether other civilizations liked it or not.